He's been a delight to work with from afar in recent months. And in fact, he came up with the title for the book, Once Free Peter Greste, no longer applied. Thank you. I've only met him in person on 3 occasions. Like so many Australians, though, I felt as though I knew him, because so much of his character has been evident in the way he has carried himself throughout this ordeal. Before handing over to Peter, I'd like to read an extract from a letter, perhaps my favourite one in the book, by Corny van der Merwe, that sums it up for me. I was in Rob Ferreira when you were an exchange student in 1983. I was shocked when I heard your name on the news about your arrest and the trial. I remembered you and your camera so well during the year you were a Robbie. That camera and your smile. It was a brilliant smile. That. Hope you haven't lost it during the time you were so unfairly treated, and that it will shine again. Probably one of my best memories of you was that one of my friends had this huge crush on you and had your name doodled all over her school diary, which fell out of her bag, and you just had to be the person who retrieved it for her. As she stood there red-faced, you handed her the diary back and said, "Don't feel bad, I feel honoured." I just have to say, this is still corny, not me. I have to admit, after that I had a little crush on you myself. And my thinking is, what a kind young man. And he hasn't changed, has he? Over to you, Peter.
It's traditional for the author of the book to be the one that stands up here and signs. And the one thing that's patently obvious is that if we were to get every author to pay to sign these things, there'd be no room in the book for anything else. A lot of people are, in fact it happened today, I was giving an interview for the ABC, and I was asked about how I felt about my experience, what lessons I've taken away about human nature, and the kind of answer that most people expect me to give when they ask that kind of question is an answer full of cynicism about the cruelty of other people, about what people do to me, what they've done to us, putting us in prison, staging a sham trial, convicting us on no evidence. But I've been a foreign correspondent for a lot of years, and one of the things that I've learned over those years is that these extreme kinds of environments bring out the very worst in people, but they also bring out the very best. And what we tend to forget is just the basic innate goodness of human beings. And the one thing that this experience has taught me is that for the handful of guys that put us in prison, there are literally thousands, and I mean thousands of people who wrote these letters. If we could put every letter in that was written, we would have volumes half the size of this damn bookstore. It was the people that got off their asses, people like Pippa and Paige and Wendy and all of the others that are here this evening who put pen to paper, who took the trouble to write to us, out of nothing other than genuine compassion for those of us who are stuck in prison. That was the thing that restores your faith in human nature. That's what makes you get up in the morning. And I promise you, I read those letters so many times. One point, the prison authorities got a bit fed up with the numbers of letters that were coming through. And so they said, look, okay, here's the thing. You're only allowed 3 letters a month. So what my family did was did a little bit of editing and came up with 3 letters that were each about 16 pages, which they stuck all of these letters together in one long screen, trusting, of course, that the Egyptian English wasn't that good. It wasn't good enough to really figure out what was going on. And I would get the letters and I'd sit there and I would tease them out over several days. It was the hardest thing to do, I've got to tell you. But as we've already heard, the thing that was extraordinary about the letters was the way that they conveyed the beauty of the mundane. And I don't mean that in any kind of sarcastic way. I mean that genuinely. As the extracts from the letters of Wendy read out, they made you realise just how special the little things are in life, the relationship with your family, the birds singing outside, the footy scores that you read. That's what really made it special. That's the thing that I really enjoyed. That's what made me appreciate the beauty of what we have, of a stable, prosperous, wonderful life that we've got here in Australia. And so this book is not about me. It really isn't. I'm on the front page of it. And I feel a little bit embarrassed. I shouldn't be here. Charlotte, I've got to thank you for all of your work in putting this thing. I mean, it started out, remember, I think everyone also really needs to understand when this book began. It began when I was still in prison, as an idea to help support the family, raise money for the campaign. And when I was finally released and the idea was fairly well developed, we realized that we couldn't just let this go. We had to take it, we had to do something with it. We had to honour the people that both wrote these letters and, frankly, your idea and your efforts, and do something and turn it into something productive. And that's why I'm also very proud that the proceeds are going to support the Foreign Prison Support Service. This is a little-known organisation, works off a shoestring. One of those, we always talk, there's a lot of cynicism about how aid money it goes to pay for grand conferences and fancy hotels. Martin Hodgson, who runs Foreign Prisoner Support Service, sold his motorbike, his only form of transport, to actually keep the thing going, particularly through the period that they were campaigning for us. So I can't think of a better, more honourable, more useful charity to receive the profits. So on that score alone, this project is worthwhile. This book is a credit to everyone involved, everyone who wrote, not just to those whose letters made it in here, but to everyone who put pen to paper, to everyone who supported us. And there is one other thing I want to point out this evening. We got a lot of political support. Anyone who's watched the reaction to our conviction last week would know we've had statements from the Wycombes, statements from Julie Bishop, statements from the Foreign Office, the British Foreign Office, statements from Ban Ki-moon. The reason that those people spoke is, and I know some of them, for them the concern is genuine, but the reason they spoke publicly was because they knew that the public cared. This is one of those things, this is one of those really rare moments where you had a huge amount of political support that really welled up from the bottom up. Do you know how many impressions the Free AJ Staff hashtag got? In the year that I was in prison, and that's not counting what happened this year, but in the 400 days, over 400 days that I was in prison, the Free AJ Staff hashtag got 3 billion impressions. Billion with a B. Now, to be fair, I know my family is probably responsible for 1 billion of those. But it was that push, that shove from below, which really made this thing important. I would not be standing here today if it weren't for that effort. I know that we're not through this. My colleagues are back in prison. I'm now a convicted felon with a 3-year prison sentence hanging over my head. But I'm telling you, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the likes of you lot. So this is a credit to everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you again. And
the very first batch of letters that arrived, and if you remember that moment and how you felt at that time.
The first batch of letters, I remember my brothers bringing in, and they told me that this was just a small selection of a whole lot of them. And I just, honestly, I couldn't believe it. And in a way, the reaction that I felt that first moment was a reaction that was repeated every time they brought in another batch of letters. It was just a kind of staggering disbelief at the fact that ordinary people actually cared enough. They gave a shit. They gave enough of a shit to get up off their backsides and actually put not just time and energy, but real thought and passion into these letters. I mean, the compassion that we, again, the letters that Wendy wrote out, the compassion that you find throughout this book was a thing that lifted me out of my out of the doldrums. It was the thing that kept us going so many times. Whenever things looked dark, believe me, all I have to do is reach for those letters.
Yeah. There were lots of letters as well from former colleagues of yours from the BBC and from Jazeera and all over the world. That must have given you a great sense of camaraderie with your fellow journalists.
Yeah, there are a few other journalists here this evening, I think. Wendy, too, amongst them. And I think one of the things that we've often talked about this, one of the most extraordinary parts about this whole episode was the way that this thing seemed to unify the journalism community. And anyone who knows the industry, you don't actually need to know the industry too well to recognise that it's full of a bunch of cranky, cantankerous, pig-headed sycophants who would rather eat their own babies than acknowledge the opposition. This was different. For some reason, I still can't put my finger on why, but for some reason, this incident, this episode, united the journalism community in a way that I don't think we've ever seen in the history and certainly in the modern history of this industry, of this business. We saw Christiane Amanpour and CNN holding up the Free AJ Staff hashtag. We saw the entire BBC newsroom standing outside the broadcasting house with Free AJ Staff hashtags and their mouths taped shut. We saw with Sky, we saw photographs from people in tiny little newsrooms in Accra and Ghana and in the Philippines and God knows all over the place. It was absolutely extraordinary, and I honestly felt absolutely incredibly proud of the way the unity came together.
You know, I reckon about probably 100 of them said at the end of the letter, when you're free, you're going to come and have dinner with me, you're going to come and have a drink. You'll be out for dinner every night for 5 years. You get over there. Were there some messages from people you'd forgotten completely about from your childhood and from your study days?
Well, you mentioned one from South Africa. That school, the high school that she mentioned, was actually a high school that I went to as an exchange student in South Africa. I was only there for a year, and so to actually receive those notes were amazing. In fact, there's someone else here this evening, Sharon, who I went to university with, and we haven't been in touch for pretty much 30 years, huh? And yet it was enough, and Sharon has a letter in here too. There were dozens, dare I say hundreds of old friends who I thought had long disappeared into the woodwork, long disappeared into the past. And so, again, I don't want to sound as though I'm trying to do the glass half full thing, but out of this whole experience, for all of the difficulty and trauma, I'm constantly amazed by just how many good things are coming out of it. And the reconnections with old friends is a really big part of that.
I'm so pleased to hear you being so positive, because it's been a dark week for you. You know, I saw you watching the television as your colleagues were taken back into custody, and I'm glad that there's something positive this week, but I'm wondering what's next for the campaign. What can people here do to help you? And what's next for you?
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Well, let's deal with the most urgent, pressing thing. The Free AJ Staff hashtag. Please keep going with it. Tell your friends about it. Tweet about it. Write to your MPs about it. It does make a difference. A couple of MPs have said to me that, in fact, the pressure from constituents actually makes a difference, because it allows them to go to the Egyptians to say, listen, it's not just me, I've got these people on my back, and we can't have a normal relationship with you until you sort this out. It's about the public pressure. It does make a difference. Believe me, it might not feel like it, but it does. The letters that you all wrote to me were hugely important. In the last couple of days, I've asked the families of Baher and Fahmy to set up similar websites. And I can announce to you tonight that they have done that. In fact, literally just as I was driving over here, Baher's brother sent me an SMS saying Baher's email is freebaher@gmail.com. And let me just double check, so that because I know that I just want to make sure. Sorry about this.
Are you going to tweet those, Peter?
I will. And yes, it is freefammy@aol.com. There's the other one. freebeher@gmail and freefammy@aol.com. Please write, because I know it makes a difference. Even if it doesn't feel like it, even if you're sending these things off into the ether, it makes a difference, it helps them, but it also lets the prison authorities know, the ones who are having to screen these letters, that there are thousands of people out there who still give a shit and who are still fighting.
I know a couple of people were asking you when I walked in, can you travel anymore? What's your status? What's your criminal status? Where can you go and where can't you go?
Officially, I'm a fugitive. The Egyptians, we don't know for sure, we're still trying to figure this out, but if the system is working as it would normally would, then there's a pretty good chance that there's an international arrest warrant out for me. That means that any border that I cross becomes potentially a problem. My lawyers, at their most conservative, are saying don't go anywhere. The trouble is that Australia is a fantastic place to be. It's the world's greatest open-air prison, as the British discovered 200 years ago. But I don't accept this verdict. We're not guilty of anything. I don't accept confinement in any form, and frankly, being confined to Australia is a form of glorified house arrest. I don't accept it in principle, and I won't accept it in practice. We are compiling a list of countries that will probably not send me back to Egypt if I wind up being detained by a rather diligent border official. Most of Europe is probably okay. The United States is okay, except, as you all know, if you have to go to the States, you have to fill out that visa waiver form, and there's that question, have you ever been convicted of a terrorist offence? Well, I kind of do. Yeah, exactly. It's a problem.
With tick celebrity box.
Yeah, exactly. Celebrity terrorist, no problem.
Often do a reality TV show.
We're fixing that problem, but the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is sending a message through the embassy to make sure that I can travel without any problems. Africa's potentially a problem because there is an extradition treaty which kind of ups the stakes a little bit more, right across the African Union. Any of the African Union states are potential problems. But again, we have some good friends at the Kenyan Foreign Ministry who I'm going to try and approach, and hopefully we'll be able to do that.
Good to hear that.
Anyone else? Yes.
What do you think of Egypt?
Well, funny you should ask. Actually, let me tell you a story. I have a problem with Egyptian politicians.
Really?
I have a problem with the Egyptian politicians. Yeah, I do.
We hadn't noticed.
There's this dungeon in the National Security Building where we go through interrogations. There's a dungeon down the bottom, and what happens is that all of the prisoners who are due to be questioned that day go into this dungeon. It's this big holding cell. And it is actually as grim as it sounds. It's this sort of cold concrete box right down in the very basement. And one of the guards was taking me out. He was taking me out for interrogation. I put him in handcuffs and was leading me in cuffs up to the room where I was supposed to be questioned. And in his broken English, he said, so where are you from? And I said, oh, I'm from Australia. He says, oh, Australia, welcome in Egypt.
Did he ask who you're back for?
The thing is that time and again, I had a genuine sense of compassion from ordinary Egyptians. Even the guards, at the time we were convicted, the guards were in tears. I'm not kidding. Our own jailers were in tears because they recognised just how screwed up the system was. Sorry, this is really getting me. And they recognised the injustice of it. So it's not Egypt as a singular lump. It's a bunch of assholes who use the system to try and cling on to power, to try and suppress the basic freedoms that we all enjoy. But God, there are so many thousands, millions of Egyptians who aren't like that. So As a country, I've got no problem with it.
How long were you there before?
2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. I was in Egypt only 2 weeks before.
You see the pyramid?
Imagine that. All that way.
Did your colleagues receive as many emails and things as you did, or was that just...
No, I mean, for Beher, as you can imagine, it was a lot harder. He's an Egyptian. Anybody that communicated directly with Beher ran the risk of being spotted by the authorities, and so the communications between either Beher or Fahmy were much more risky, much riskier for them from the inside. Fahmy was a Canadian and had a lot of support from the Canadians, but again, how do I say this? Not politely, but they didn't have the Greste family.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as we've heard, the Greste family is quite formidable, and if there's a reason that I'm here again today, if there's a reason that people know me, know my story, and feel as though they know who I am, it's because I'm standing on the platform that the Greste family built.
What do they think about you wanting to travel again, young man?
Mum's not real chuffed about that.
Neither am I.
How do we write to your brothers and your mum and dad?
Oh, that's a good question. There is an email address that existed. Let me find out. Let me see if I can find out a way that if you really want. I mean, if you'd like to write to them, then I'm just
Congratulate them on a
okay.
fantastic job.
There is an email address. Let me give you an email address. FPG Public Relations. It's a horrible email address. It's a hangover from the last one, but FPG Public Relations, and we'll make sure they get it.
Peter, often we hear from journalists discussion about the government and about a faceless organisation of a large scale, particularly overseas. But from your experience, did you get the impression there was one person or two people in Egypt who held your fate?
I don't know. I have no idea, and this is part of the problem for us. The system in Egypt is so opaque that we had no idea what was driving the decision-making process, who was really behind it, what sort of political pressures they were under, what it was that they were trying to achieve. We just don't know. So as much as I'd like to be able to give you an answer, I really have not a clue. What I do know is they're juggling some very complex political problems. I don't mean to excuse them for that, but it's a hellishly difficult place and a dangerously polarised place. Any others?
What details are you writing to your colleagues in prison now?
Sorry, what?
What details are you writing in letters to your colleagues who are in prison now?
Oh, I'm telling them what's going on to support them. One of the things that my family kept saying to me was, listen, Pete, you don't get it. You don't understand just how big the support is, how big this campaign is. And I'd sort of say, I humoured them. I'd say, yeah, of course I don't get it. You know, how could I possibly not know? But inside I'm thinking, look, I'm a journalist. This is my business. I know what's going on here. I had no idea. I had not a damn clue. Really, I had no idea just how massive the support was, how widespread it was. And so they need to understand as well, because that's the thing that kept us going throughout, and that's the thing that will keep them going from here on.
So it underlines the fact that we need all to be sending them messages.
Please do. Yeah, please do. It will make a difference, I promise. Yeah.
Peter. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. Do you have any concerns about journalistic freedom in Australia over the coming years, considering the political climate of the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I don't want to make this a kind of political, political rant.
I wasn't going to ask.
No, that's okay. I've said this publicly a few times before. I am concerned about it. I think one of the things that we're doing with the war on terror is using the war on terror as an excuse for all sorts of draconian legislation without really thinking about the consequences for the basic freedoms that have made our country stable, one of the most stable, prosperous and peaceful places on the planet. Part of that is freedom of speech and an open noisy, loud, sometimes a potty-mouthed press that has held governments to account and allowed free and open public debate. What we're seeing with the legislation is a very deliberate narrowing of the space in which we're allowed to work. In the war on terror, we can't. The war on terror is a war over an idea, over an ism. It's not a war over stuff, over anything tangible, which is a way of being in the past. The trouble is that in a war over an idea, over a worldview, the battlefield is the media. That's the space where this conflict is taking place. And journalists have become targets in a way that we've never seen before. Now, the problem is that in this environment, if you as a journalist start to investigate or interrogate the issues around the war on terror, you become targets of both the authorities who start to investigate who it is that you're talking to, what's on your email, who it is that you're communicating with, and potentially lock you up as they did us. If you, from the other side, you're just as likely to get your head removed from your shoulders as Stephen Sokolov and James Foley discovered to their cost in Syria. So I worry that this whole abuse of the war on terror, the war on an abstract noun, as a friend of mine rather rightly put it, has what that's done to press freedom. I don't think we're having the debate sufficiently about the impact of the government's legislation on press freedom. And if nothing else, what we have to do, if Australia decides it wants that legislation, fine, but I think as long as it understands the consequences, and I don't think we fully understand the consequences.
So you continue to be a journalist?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not ready to quit. I still believe in this. I still think this is a worthwhile business. I know journalism has taken a few hits over the years. I know that our reputation is down somewhere in the gutter. But I still think, and I think if there's one thing that our case has done, is remind people actually why a free press really does matter and why it is worth fighting for.
Still with Al Jazeera?
Yes, still with Al Jazeera. But it's going to be a part-time job, because one other thing that this whole experience has done is that it's given me a platform. As I said, I think it's given me a platform not because of anything we've done, but because of what was done to us. But that platform is there. I've got lecterns and microphones and cameras and so on. And so if people are prepared to listen, then I'll talk, and I'll keep talking about press freedom. I feel like I've got a responsibility now, and so that's the other part of my life.